It's a quiet evening in a bustling city, and the hum of everyday life fills the air. But what starts as a routine moment soon spirals into an intense and unexpected confrontation. A black woman, confident and composed, is approached by an officer whose demeanor is anything but professional. His tone is sharp, his words laced with authority that feels more intimidating than protective. The woman, dressed neatly and carrying herself with grace, tries to remain calm, but it's clear the officer has singled her out for reasons that go beyond what's fair or just. As the situation unfolds, the tension grows. The officer begins questioning her, his voice growing louder, demanding answers to questions that don't seem to make sense. She responds with quiet dignity, refusing to let his harsh words rattle her. But the officer doesn't back down. Instead, he pushes harder, escalating the situation. Passers-by start to notice, their eyes flickering with concern and confusion. And then, just when it seems like the officer has her cornered, something incredible happens. The woman reaches into her bag and pulls out a badge, a police chief badge. The air shifts instantly. The officer's face freezes, his bravado evaporating in an instant. It's a moment no one saw coming, and the crowd can hardly believe their eyes. What happens next will leave you stunned. Does the officer apologize? Does he double down? And how does this woman, armed with more than just authority, handle the shocking turn of events? Stay tuned, because this is a story about power, identity, and the strength it takes to stand tall in the face of injustice. The street feels frozen in time as the officer stares at the badge in her hand, his jaw tightening. The once confident authority in his voice is now replaced by an uneasy silence. The woman holds her ground, her eyes locked on him, unshaken. She doesn't say a word, she doesn't have to. The badge speaks volumes, and everyone around knows it. But who is she? And how did she end up in this moment? The crowd murmurs and whispers, trying to piece together the story. Some recognize her face from community meetings or local news reports. She's not just a police chief, she's a trailblazer, one of the few black women to rise to such a powerful position in the department. Her career has been built on integrity and resilience, a stark contrast to the behavior she's facing now. For years, she's worked to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community, earning respect in a world where it's rarely given freely. The officer, on the other hand, is still a mystery. Why did he target her? Was it because of her race, her gender, or something else entirely? His actions suggest this isn't just a misunderstanding. It feels deliberate. But his reaction to the badge hints at something deeper: fear, maybe even guilt. Does he realize he's harassed not just a citizen but his superior? Or is this a sign of a systemic problem, one he's been part of for too long? The woman doesn't flinch as the officer stammers, trying to regain control of the situation. Her silence is powerful, her expression unreadable. The crowd waits, holding its breath, unsure of what will happen next. Will the officer own up to his actions, or will he try to justify them? And what will she do with the authority she's just revealed? The story has only begun, and the tension is higher than ever. The balance of power has shifted, but the outcome is far from certain. The officer shifts uncomfortably, his confidence crumbling in front of the growing crowd. He stares at the badge again, his face flushing with a mix of embarrassment and unease. But instead of apologizing or backing down, he tries to salvage his authority. "I was just following protocol," he mutters, though his voice lacks the conviction it carried moments ago. His words hang in the air, hollow and unconvincing. The woman tilts her head slightly, her expression calm but piercing. She finally speaks, her voice steady and firm. Protocol or prejudice? Her question isn't loud, but it cuts through the murmurs around them, making the officer falter. The crowd is silent now, eyes darting between the two, waiting for what comes next. Nearby, a young man pulls out his phone and starts recording, capturing the unfolding drama. This isn't just about one woman and one officer anymore, it's about something bigger. People are watching, and the weight of accountability begins to settle over the scene. The officer glances at the cameras, his discomfort deepening, but still, he doesn't back down. Meanwhile, an older woman in the crowd steps forward, her face lined with experience and wisdom. She locks eyes with the officer and says, "This isn't the first time you've done something like this, is it?" Her words carry the weight of someone who's seen this pattern before. The officer's face hardens, but he doesn't respond. The silence is answer enough. The tension builds as the police chief, still holding her badge, takes a small step closer. "What's your name?" she asks, her tone unwavering. He hesitates, glancing at the crowd as if looking for an escape. "Officer Miller," he finally replies, his voice quieter now. The young man with the phone whispers to someone beside him, "This is going viral for sure." The air feels charged with a mix of justice and unease. Everyone knows this encounter is far from over. What's at stake isn't just the officer's reputation, it's the trust between the community and those sworn to protect it. The crowd presses in closer, their collective energy buzzing with anticipation. Phones are out, recording every word, every movement. Officer Miller shifts uncomfortably, the weight of his actions now undeniable under so many watchful eyes. Yet, instead of stepping down, he clings to his crumbling authority. "I need to see some identification," he says, his voice uneven, but still attempting to command control. The irony of the request is not lost on anyone. He's demanding proof of identity from the very woman whose badge outranks him. The police chief raises an eyebrow, her calm demeanor unwavering. She doesn't reach for her wallet or offer any further explanation. Instead, she meets his gaze with a quiet but unmistakable authority. "You've already seen it," she says, holding up her badge again. The words are simple, but the weight behind them is enormous. The crowd murmurs in agreement, emboldened by her composure. But Miller doesn't retreat. His pride and fear seem to fuel him as he takes a step forward, his hand hovering near his radio. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me until we sort this out," he says, though even he seems unsure of what he's doing. The tension in his voice betrays his growing panic. The crowd gasps and someone shouts, "She's your boss." "Are you serious right now?" The atmosphere grows even more charged, a mix of disbelief and simmering anger. The young man with the phone calls out, "This is why we don't trust the police. Look at this." His words ripple through the onlookers, sparking nods and murmurs of agreement. The police chief stands her ground, her expression sharpening. She takes a slow, deliberate step closer to Miller, her presence commanding the moment. "Think very carefully about your next move," she says, her voice low but firm enough to silence the entire street. Her words hang in the air like a warning, heavy with implications. Miller hesitates, his hand frozen near the radio. The crowd leans in, their collective breath held as the situation teeters on the edge of escalation. All eyes are on the two of them, waiting for the moment that will change everything. The tension is almost unbearable as Miller stands frozen, his hand hovering near his radio. The crowd watches intently, a mix of anger, disbelief, and curiosity etched across their faces. The police chief doesn't move, her gaze steady and unrelenting. For a moment, it feels like the standoff might break, but then another voice cuts through the air. "Officer Miller, stand down." The words come from behind the crowd, authoritative and calm, yet laced with urgency. Heads turn to see another officer approaching, his uniform crisp and his expression serious. Unlike Miller, this man carries himself with a clear sense of control. He's older, seasoned, and the way the crowd parts for him suggests respect, or perhaps recognition. Miller's face pales as the new officer steps into view. "Captain Andrews?" he stammers, his bravado melting away. The captain's eyes dart between Miller and the police chief, quickly assessing the situation. It's clear he knows who she is, and that Miller's in deep trouble. "Chief Daniels," Captain Andrews says, nodding respectfully toward her. "I apologize for whatever misunderstanding has occurred here." His voice is steady, but there's an undercurrent of tension. He knows the scene is already spiraling beyond control, and the presence of recording phones only heightens the stakes. But Chief Daniels doesn't immediately respond. Her eyes remain fixed on Miller, who's now visibly shaken. "Misunderstanding," she repeats, her voice calm but sharp. "Is that what you think this is?" The captain hesitates, glancing briefly at the growing crowd. It's clear he's caught between loyalty to his department and the undeniable reality of what's unfolding. Before he can answer, someone from the crowd shouts, "How many times has this happened before?" The question cuts through the air, igniting a ripple of murmurs. It's not just about Miller anymore. It's about every story like this, every unspoken moment of prejudice and misuse of power. And then another twist. One of the bystanders steps forward. "I have proof," the man says, holding up his phone. "I've been filming him for weeks." His words send a shockwave through the crowd, and through Miller, who takes a step back, his face now a mask of fear. The stakes have just been raised, and everyone knows there's no turning back. The crowd falls silent as the man steps forward, holding up his phone. His voice is steady, but carries a weight that stops everyone in their tracks. "I've seen him harass people in this neighborhood before," he says, his tone resolute. "But I never thought I'd catch him targeting someone like you, Chief." Officer Miller's face drains of color as the man scrolls through his phone, pulling up video after video. The recordings show Miller approaching people, mostly black residents, with the same aggressive demeanor, demanding identification and escalating situations without cause. Gasps ripple through the onlookers, anger and disbelief spreading like wildfire. Miller stumbles back, his hand falling away from his radio as the gravity of the situation hits him. Chief Daniels takes the phone, her expression unreadable as she watches the clips. When she looks up, her voice is calm, but carries an unmistakable authority. "Captain Andrews," she says, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. "I trust you'll handle this appropriately. It's not a request, it's a directive." Andrews nods, his jaw tight, before turning to Miller. "You're relieved of duty," Andrews says firmly. "Hand over your badge and firearm." The crowd erupts in murmurs, some cheering, others still processing what they've just witnessed. Miller's hands tremble as he removes his badge, the weight of accountability finally crushing down on him. But just as it seems justice is served, Chief Daniels raises a hand, quieting the crowd. "This isn't just about one officer," she says, her voice steady and commanding. "It's about a system that allows this behavior to go unchecked. This ends now." The unexpected twist comes when another officer in the crowd speaks up, her voice wavering but determined. "Chief, I have something to add," she says, stepping forward. There are more reports, filed complaints that were buried. The crowd gasps again, and Daniel's expression hardens. The story doesn't end with Miller's dismissal. Instead, it sparks a deeper reckoning, one that challenges not just individuals, but the very foundation of accountability within the department. As the crowd disperses, there's a sense of both resolution and the promise of change, a powerful reminder that justice isn't a moment, but a movement. As the crowd began to thin, the weight of the moment lingered in the air. Chief Daniels stood tall, watching Officer Miller being escorted away by Captain Andrews. His badge and firearm, once symbols of authority, were now stark reminders of accountability catching up with him. The murmurs of the crowd were a mix of relief, anger, and hope. Relief that justice had started to unfold, anger at the injustices revealed, and hope that this moment could spark real change. The man with the phone approached Chief Daniels again. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "For standing up, for showing us that someone at the top cares." Daniels nodded, her calm exterior giving way to a faint smile. "This is just the beginning," she replied. "We've got work to do." The young man who had been recording everything uploaded the footage online that night, and within hours, it spread like wildfire. The videos captured not only Miller's actions, but also Chief Daniels' strength and leadership. The story resonated with people far beyond the city, becoming a symbol of resilience, justice, and the urgent need for accountability within law enforcement. Within days, An internal investigation was launched, not just into Miller, but into the systemic issues brought to light by the other officers' revelations. Complaints that had been buried were unearthed, and several officers were called to answer for their actions or inactions. Chief Daniels led the charge, working alongside Captain Andrews to ensure transparency and integrity. In the weeks that followed, Daniels became a central figure in the city's push for reform. Community meetings swelled with attendees, voices that had long been silenced finally being heard. The department introduced mandatory bias training and independent oversight, small steps toward rebuilding trust. As she walked through the neighborhood one evening, Daniels noticed familiar faces nodding at her, some even stopping to thank her. The road ahead was long, but the foundations of change were being laid. In that moment, she knew, standing up wasn't just about one confrontation. It was about creating a legacy of justice and accountability for everyone.